this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being fair to our young ones the way we do assessment today? The way we glorify examinations.
A curriculum has to have a technical name that is known and accepted within the entire world.
The essence of education in our definition as curriculum developers is that you should be able to adapt to different situations all
Curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the National Registration Framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
In this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being fair to our young ones the way we do assessment today? The way we glorify examinations.
A curriculum has to have a technical name that is known and accepted within the entire world.
The essence of education in our definition as curriculum developers is that you should be able to adapt to different situations all through your life.
Honorable Minister of Education, Ghana, Your Excellency, the Secretary General of OEC, esteemed chairpersons of ACA, dear representative of African Union, dear National Directors of Curriculum, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to attend again the African Curriculum Conference, even though it is online today, this morning. I would have loved to be with you, but for some complications in my agenda, I have not been able to make it. Sorry for that. I would also like to extend my warmest congratulations to our partner, ACA, to the CESA Curriculum Cluster of AU, and to OEC for the organization of this very important conference. Please note that you have all the support of IBE. I would also like to express my appreciation to the Kenyan Institute of Curriculum Development for hosting the conference and for their long-standing cooperation with IBE and UNESCO in general, represented by Dr. Lamin So, the Head of Education, UNESCO Nairobi for Eastern Africa, who is in the room. Thank you very much, Lamin, for accepting to represent me in this very important conference. Let me start by saying 2 words about UNESCO IBE. Created in 1925 and led for more than 40 years by Jean Piaget, the mandate of IBE has been renewed 4 years ago by UNESCO General Conference. We focus on education quality improvement through curriculum transformation. With the impact of COVID on education content, and provisions, curriculum reforms have been on the global agenda education discussions, and UNESCO IDE has been highly solicited. Our world is rapidly evolving, and education must adapt accordingly, promoting ICT in education, technology, e-assessment, hybrid teaching and learning, differentiated pedagogy, and the fourth industrial revolution that offer immense potential for inclusive and dynamic education. As we explore curriculum matters, IB is keen on promoting indigenous curricula that value African cultures, traditional knowledge, languages as medium of interaction, digital literacy for all, socio-emotional learning that has proven to be so important during COVID. I appreciate a lot the topic of this conference that underlines the pivotal role of curriculum for the challenges and opportunities of the future. At a global level, we have witnessed the Transforming Education Summit held in New York that launched global initiatives to support education transformation, to accelerate the achievement of SDG 4 by 2030, and it clearly came out in New York that education cannot be transformed if curriculum and curricula are not transformed, showing thereby the importance of IBE work as well as that of organizations like ACA. UNESCO's World Conference on Early Childhood Care and Education resulted in Tashkent Declaration, where member states are urged not only to give more importance to early childhood in education policies, but also to increase national education budget given to early childhood up to at least 10% of the total education spending, and not continue to leave early childhood education only in the hands of private sector, because it has been proven that investing in the first 1,000 days of a child is key for his success in all domains, namely in education. In our midterm strategy in RUN, IB has decided to work on the improvement of early childhood quality in the following three axes. The first one is science and technology awareness in early childhood education. The second one is environment awareness. And the third one is values and attitude awareness in early childhood education. Last week, I was in Yaoundé, Cameroon, with some of the directors of curriculum that are present in this room for a workshop on science and technology awareness in early childhood curriculum, because we need more scientists to develop Africa. And today, we have very seldom students that are interested in science, among others because science is taught in a very rebarbative way and it is mystified. So we think that demystifying science, starting by early childhood, will encourage many kids and learners to interest themselves in science. The IRB remains committed to support UNESCO member states in achieving SDG 4 through curriculum transformation and adjustment. Our partnership with African countries aligns with UNESCO's Priority Africa program, also with the AU 2063 agenda and the CESAR's main line of action. We advocate for indigenous curricula that embrace different cultures, values, and languages, fostering the Africa we want by 2063. I would like to share with you and invite education partners in this room and in Africa, like OEC, ACA, and ACA members, to join us in a number of the following ongoing work that IB is working on. The first, IB has developed a flagship program to support the teaching and learning and assessment of general East of Africa, knowing the value of diverse cultures in nurturing global citizenship, and teaching and learning modules on general East of Africa are in elaboration under IBE supervision. The second, on the basis of UNESCO's 50 years of experience on multilingual education and lessons learned and recommendations drawn, the IBE is currently supporting many countries on the promotion of mother tongue-based education and local languages as medium of instruction to improve learning relevance and inclusion. The third asks, the national capacity development is crucial for us for successful curriculum reforms. Therefore, IB supports the creation of regional masters and the postgraduate diplomas in curriculum. We have one in Uruguay for Latin America, one in Lithuania for Central Europe, one in Dubai for Arab countries, one in Tanzania for Southern Africa, and we have just launched the master in Senegal for West Africa, and we are about to launch by August the master in Congo for Central Africa, and the one by the end of the year in Mozambique for Lusophone speaking countries. On the basis of the IB resource pack on curriculum, we have to date about 40 national education experts, curriculum developers, didactic experts, pedagogues, evaluators, etc., who are under training by IBE in 11 countries, 9 in Africa, plus Haiti and Palestine. The fourth area for which I invite you to join us is that many countries continue to use outdated pedagogy based on memorization. The IBE proposed guidelines and tools to foster creativity, critical thinking in pedagogy as essential to get learners' interest and commitment. The fifth ask I'm calling your support for is that the IBE has a flagship program that is called Hybrid Education Learning and Assessment that aims to combine in-person and online education effectively. By capitalizing on lessons learned during the pandemic, the IBE supports countries in strengthening online education and the development of digital competencies, preparing learners for digital era. The last but one, the sixth one, is the promotion of green and blue curriculum. You know, UNESCO organized 6 months ago a conference in Berlin on environment education, and it came out that in many countries, curricula are very weak in promoting green education. IBE has developed a flagship called Green and Blue curriculum. The blue is about the ocean. You know that studies indicate that in the coming 20 years, one of the main cause of conflict in the world will be lack of clean water. So, how to start by teaching kids, starting by early childhood education, to protect water is key to put in curricula today. The last one is, as we prepare to celebrate the IBE centenary in 2025, I extend an invitation to ACA and ACA members and OEC and other partners to join us in shaping a brighter future for education globally and in Africa. To conclude, I would like to say that all these 7 axes that I've just mentioned, I would like to invite you to join us by expressing your interests. Let me conclude by saying that together we can reimagine curricula, leverage on technology and artificial intelligence, and embrace sustainability to create inclusive and contextualized relevant learning experience for all in Africa. I would like to close my intervention by wishing us very fruitful conference and see you soon. Thank you for listening. Merci beaucoup. Honorable Minister of Education, Ghana.
Thank you. Let's put our hands together again for Mr. Yao. We need to apologize for the hitch that we had initially, and we request that we move on. So to break the monotony, because the third address also was also to be online, after consultation with my director, we feel that let's have some human touch. So in this point in time, allow me to invite my director, Chief Executive Officer, Professor Charles Ongondo, who is going to present on navigating multiple contexts in the curriculum reform process, a Kenyan experience. This session will be chaired by my colleague, Dr. Lydia Musheru. So, Prof, come on board. Thank you. As he comes on board, let's put our hands together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair of the Day, for giving me this opportunity to welcome the CEO. I want to believe that our participants from West Africa, the one who is translating for you, is doing well. Are we together? Our colleagues from South Africa? West Africa. They can hear us. You can hear us. It's being translated, isn't it? Good, we are together. I know they didn't hear that question that I asked. They didn't understand. But allow me, as much as we saw the director since yesterday, to bring on board the director and CEO of KICD, who is our keynote speaker for this morning, among others. We just thought of breaking the monotony of two online presentations. So he will come and then we'll continue with the other keynote speaker before we go to our breakaway rooms. This time I want to introduce Professor Charles Ochieng Ongondo, who is the CEO at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. I hope you're not saying yes, we know. Just sit there and listen. He is an associate professor in teacher education. He is a Commonwealth Academic Fellow and Scholar who holds a postdoctoral fellowship in research methodology. This is from a university in the UK, University Warwick. A PhD in English language teacher education, and this is from the University of Leeds in the UK. Before he joined the Institute, KICD, Professor Ongondo was the Executive Director of African Network for International Internalization of Education, ANIE, A-N-I-E. This is from the period 2017 to 2021. During that time, he served as an associate professor of teacher education at Moi University, and was a lead consultant in a number of international and institutional research projects. And I want to proudly say one of the projects was right here with us when we began CBC. He walked with us that journey. No wonder he speaks about it like has always been there. And apart from that, his academic interests are research methodology. Researchers in the Institute knows how passionate he gets when he starts talking about research. Teacher education, English language pedagogy, training of trainers, curriculum design and evaluation, academic writing, and organizational communication. Let's put our hands together and welcome Professor Ongondo. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, my colleague, Dr. Lydia Mushero. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Can I have a more lively response? Good morning. And as I told you yesterday, in this part of the country, we also insist on adding, God is good, and all the time. That is his nature. Wow, wow, wow. Gives me great pleasure again to be able to address this conference. And so, by way of preliminaries, I want to again thank the organizers of ACA, and particularly for choosing to have us host this conference. Psychologically, when people hear of conferences, they think of another country, they think of abroad. And so colleagues who have come from abroad, while you are welcome again to Kenya, I have also decided to join you by psychologically assuming that I'm abroad, I'm out of Kenya. So a colleague of mine, Eunice Gashoka, was telling me she has sent something to my office. And I was telling her, Eunice, I'm not in Kenya. I'm abroad for the ACA conference. So a conference is extremely important, and I've pleaded with my colleagues at KSCD to take advantage. So you will realize that we are going to be having almost 8 papers from the Institute when we break. And as an academic, because I work for the university, I'm still on leave of absence. I know that one of the criteria for your promotion is that you have presented a conference paper. So I want to congratulate all of us who are here and even plead that in future we take advantage of such conferences. I'm privy to the fact that the papers will be published, and Dr. Gertrude here, if you want the support of the Institute alongside the other institutes, I think we need to take this up as a way of making sure that we publish the papers of this conference. Another preliminary that I want to get rid of is to say that, still in the spirit of conference, it is a moment to display what colleagues among us here have published, and so that we get to know about them, but also as a way of encouraging more colleagues to publish, especially around education, around the curriculum, and particularly about the competency-based curriculum. So this morning, allow me to acknowledge a colleague among us, Dr. Jane Imbunya. Daktari, I talked to you about yesterday, please rise again. And Dr. Imbunya has written 3 interesting books. One of them is Competency-Based Curriculum, Accountability for Kenya's Career Readiness. Please put your hands together for her. Thank you very much. These books, you could sit, Daktari, are very important. Some of my colleagues at KSCD, and I believe elsewhere, have realized when we talk about the competence-based curriculum, people think we are thinking about something from the clouds. You know, we are copying and pasting from some distant country. So it gives me great pleasure that a Kenyan citizen has written on this. Her 2 other books are one on a difficult subject of constructivism, I'll be saying something about that, and research methods. Another colleague, who is probably not here, has written a book also on the competence-based approaches to curriculum. That is a person called Professor Shiundu. Professor Shiundu, those of you who went to Kenyan universities long ago, was a pioneer curriculum scholar and professor. He's written another book, but this time round focusing on the competency-based curriculum. Yesterday, while walking around the exhibition booth, I came across another one. I don't know the authors, but I thought, after perusing through the content, that is something that's important to read. A competency-based curriculum in the context of Africa. A practical guide for teachers. I have already purchased 10 copies for the Institute, so my colleagues, if you don't want to buy your own, visit the library beginning tomorrow. and because I think it's extremely important reading. So that I can also still articulate my relevance as a scholar, allow me to blow my own trumpet by saying that Dr. Juan, who was a former director here, and I also recently in the year 2020 wrote a book on qualitative research process from conceptualization to examination. Copies will be available on the KICD booth. You may want to take a copy and just give us feedback on what we have written. I thought you were going to clap for us on that note. The last ritual, I have a colleague from Moi University here sent by the Vice Chancellor, and because I'm still substantively staff of Moi University, I wanted to reintroduce Dr. Susan Kurgat. Yes, please put your hands together to Daktari. Yes. We are not just colleagues of Moi University, we are members of the same department. It is called Curriculum, Instruction and Educational Media. In Kenya, colleagues who are visiting us, it is common these days to find people who claim they are professors, they are doctors, they are learned. And the issue of whether people went to school or not have even been subjects of court cases. So it's good to confirm, to always point out whom did you go to school with. So, Daktari, thank you for being here. It confirms that I went to school and that I'm a professor of Moi University. Now, turning back to my paper, colleagues, I know you have the abstract, but taking advantage of my professorship, I want to define that an abstract usually is not intended to give much. And so I took care just to give you a few lines. In academic circles, we define an abstract as a miniskirt. It is just long enough to cover the subject matter, but short enough to attract attention. So I want to own up. Some of your abstracts have changed because I took the liberty to look at all of them, and in some cases, I made sure that I reduced them to miniskirts for your purpose. But one of the things that we need to do when we present papers at a conference is to say, what paper is it that you are presenting? So on this occasion, I want to say that being in the second year on the tail end, almost third, being on the tail end of my third year as a Chief Executive Officer, KICD, and coming from the academic background, I have started thinking about what book shall I leave behind? How will I share my experience? And so the paper I'm presenting is an exposition. It's an explanatory paper that captures some brainstorming that I've already started engaging with in terms of what is it that I found most intriguing in my role as Chief Executive Officer of a Curriculum Development Institute of an African country which is just about 6 years old. I think that is what makes it relevant here because some of my colleagues are here. And one of the things that have intrigued me, and I want to declare that this I'm presenting, yes, based on a lot of experience from my current job, but I'm presenting this as Charles Ochieng Ongondo and not CEO KICD. So whatever issues I present are not meant to represent the institute. They are mine as an academic. It's always good to own up so that my colleagues are not crucified for the things I will say. I take responsibility as a scholar. So one of the things that has intrigued me about the curriculum is the number of contexts that you have to navigate as a curriculum developer, as a curriculum development institution. And this brings me back to appreciating the theme. The people who thought about this, I wasn't among you, but the people who thought about connections between the curriculum, cognition, and context. So I thought that there could be a number of contexts that are always playing for you as a curriculum developer to navigate. And in the role of CEO, if you can go to the next slide, please. In the role of a CEO, one harmless title you carry is that of accounting officer. So one of the challenges you will always face is that your colleagues in the institute, and here we have a number of competent people. Dr. Mbunya, the staff I have at KICD as curriculum developers qualified to teach in any university in the world. So very competent, experienced people you're talking about. However, there are times, many times you find yourself alone at a corner as a CEO to defend what they have written, and sometimes even to erase what they have come up with, or to dilute it in a way. And you can't come back to them and face them and say, Grace Ngugi, I know you had a very good expected learning outcomes for pertinent and contemporary issues, but I'm sorry I deleted one. You are not going to go back to Charity Macau and say, I know you have very good intentions for language teaching at junior school, but I'm afraid this one we have to get off. Sometimes you have to take responsibility where you are. So there are many, many contexts to navigate, which I thought is a book for which we have a gap. And later on, Gertrude, I'll be suggesting how ACA can protect us in navigating this space. So I have identified about 4 contexts. One of them is historical, which I'll go over, and then academic or cognitive, then institutional, which I'm stroking with administrative, because sometimes the boundary is very thin, and then the most interesting one, the political context. I was told to point at the people at the back if I want to move it, but if I do that and it's not moving, can you help me by moving to the next stage? Next slide, please. Yes, thank you very much. Now, I want to start with an operationalization of some key terms. Academics who are here know that one of the first things you do is to have a place called operational definition of terms. Operationalization is a heavy word, and it reminds me of how Lydia was struggling with the pronunciation of internationalization. And just in case I forget, yes, I am still a member of ANI, Africa Network for Internationalization of Education, and ANI has a conference in Zanzibar in October, to which words, knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes have been compacted just into the word competencies. So we could say, therefore, in this context, the word curriculum refers to a plan for development of a people's competencies. But when we talk about competencies, remember we are talking about human beings, and therefore it is always important to remember that we are talking about a complex integration of those 4 other key words: knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. It's not easy to separate them. Sometimes I'm in fora where I'm asked to say, out of the curriculum KICD has developed, which one is knowledge? Which one are skills? Now, which parts are values and which are attitudes? And sometimes the people asking you that want answers in concrete terms, and they want you, Gertrude, sometimes even to cost them. So in the competency-based curriculum, can you cost for us the money that will lead us towards getting the knowledge, that which will lead us towards getting the skills and attitudes, the jobs you do as a CEO? So I'm talking about a plan. I don't want to call it a schedule. And while talking about a plan, one thing I need to underscore, and I always told my colleagues at KICD, a plan can always be modified. A plan is alive. A plan is not fixed on stone, and therefore a curriculum is never fixed on stone. But the most problematic word is the word education. And in my career, I've been a teacher all my life, from the 1990s. Today, a colleague of mine told me as I was coming at the reception that, hey, director, you look very young. So I'm not very young. I started teaching in the 1990s. The point here is that since I went to college in 1988, one of the words I've been struggling with is the word education. So I've decided to operationalize what I'm going to use it for this time. And I want to define education as a complex, a comprehensive provision of an environment, opportunity, experiences, and resources for nurturing a people's competencies for life. That life could be within their immediate communities, but today we appreciate that we are talking about a global context. So education is a system. My lecturer in second year at university, who is still alive, took me through something called the systems approach to education. So when we talk about education, we are talking about institutions, we are talking about policies, we are talking about resources, we are talking about economics of education, we are talking about philosophies and so on. And therefore, it is important for us as curriculum developers to always tell all those who care to listen that what we are reforming, even as we talk about curriculum reforms here, sometimes we are not necessarily talking about educational reforms, because that might mean, Gertrude, that we have to go back to the Constitution and think about the provisions for education in the Constitution and reform them. In Kenya and in basic education, that might mean that we are going back to the Basic Education Act and we are making changes, and that might mean we are looking at all those policies that we are talking about. So we want to declare that when we are reforming a curriculum, we are talking about the reform of a plan on how we shall offer our learners competencies towards a vision and not a reform of education. And colleagues, I'm saying this because otherwise you start to fight, to take on a fight that is not your own. The moment people think that you are reforming education, they feel threatened. They feel like attacking you. They have claws. And especially because of what I'll mention as jurisdictional territories. Because as KSCD, people have always asked me, who tells you you have the authority to claim you are reforming our education? And I say, hallelujah, we are only reforming the curriculum because we are a Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. So please always take on top that. Now, I mentioned the word vision, and I want to dispense with it, that we are always developing a curriculum not for the curriculum development's sake, but towards a vision. And that vision may be stated or not. In a way, as you came through the gate, you saw the vision of the Institute as a skilled and ethical society, but the vision of this curriculum is an empowered and ethical and an engaged citizen. I might revisit that later. A bit of literature. There's no academic who presents a paper without mentioning literature. And I want to point out that the curriculum reform process is provided for in a lot of literature. And in the book that I intend to write, I will want to revisit this from the days of Aristotle and Plato, whom we always fall back on. But I might even want to stretch it to the times of Jesus Christ. Because if you read the Bible, particularly the New Testament, you find a lot that have to do with the fact that we need to always reform our curricula, how we deal with others. Now, one of the points I pick up, I think the next, before you come to Darling Hammond, there's something before that slide. Go back 2 steps, supervisor. In multiple problems that require solutions. And colleagues, I think this is something we can always cling on to also, that we have changing manifestations of the problems that confront us. And on the tail end of my presentation, I'll be inviting some colleagues here to present now the digital space and how a small construct puzzles us. Now we can move to Darling Hammond, my favorite writer in terms of Darling Hammond's writings is mostly on teacher education, which is my area, but what she writes can speak to a lot of what else we do in the curriculum. And she says best practices in professions emerge only with responses to revelations of gaps in current provisions. Darling Hammond is an American lady, and she has written a book on the best practices in teacher education based on research on teacher education curricula from about 20 countries in different parts of the world. And then the last one, always remember to quote yourself, just in case there are a few people quoting you. And those of you who are in this room who have been my PhD students, there are moments I have insisted that you must cite me. Dr. Kurgat is aware. If your students don't cite you, who will cite you? So on this occasion, I have a paper, a small paper I've written on the knowledge base for teacher education. And I argue that teacher education has evolved since the initial recordings in history. If you look at books on history of teacher education, picking it just from around the 1960s, and talking strictly about my own subject, English language teaching, we have moved from 10 documented approaches. Those of you who are in that area will recall that we started from an approach called the grammar translation. We moved to the reading method, we went through Suggestopedia, community service learning, and in 2023 as I talk, one writer called Kumarabadivelu is arguing that why are we struggling with methodologies? We are in the post-method era. So what does that mean? That there are many, many problems that emerge that we need to deal with. Next slide now. Yes, so let me also give you a brief mention of the curriculum reform journey in Kenya because it's going to anchor my context. When I come to them, I promise you I'll move like lightning. The curriculum reform initiatives have been a feature of the Kenyan context from pre-independence, and I believe in many, many other African countries. Because one of the first things we must appreciate as curriculum developers is the fact that, yes, we had curricula before we went into formal education as was introduced to us by historians. And that curriculum that we had, Mbiti is a Kenyan who has written a lot about the African traditional education, says even that African traditional education curricula was always a subject of constant reviews. Largely we know that it was apprentice-based, but, well, that just meant that you learned at the feet of people who are already professionals. Whether they were professional doctors, yes, we had doctors. Whether they were smiths, yes, we had metalsmiths. And whether they were teachers, whether they were seers or prophets. But the curriculum development initiative kept on. And I want to invite, especially people like Evans Moss. Where is Evans? Who are still PhD students, to really go back and explore. Because, colleagues, we don't quite have much interest these days on revisiting our African traditional education, and especially the curricula that used to obtain. If I had time, I would have taken you through the African, especially now Kenyan, and when you talk Kenyan, you can talk about the Luo curriculum in performing arts. I veer a little into performing arts, where we have music, dance, and film, and theater. But maybe at the end we shall see. Now, the current curriculum reform journey in Kenya is probably one of the most dramatic. I don't know if there's somebody from Rwanda here. In East African community, Rwanda is leading us in its implementation of the competency-based curriculum. And it has not been it was so smooth. The review of the curriculum in Rwanda was so smooth. It was also as dramatic as we have in Kenya. Uganda, I'm told that you started a bit of grammar, because we follow, you are our neighbors. Occasionally when I'm in Busia, I cross the border to have a taste of chairman. Where is Nzioka? Chairman is a special type of tea in Uganda. So don't condemn me. Yes, I know you have had your share of the curriculum reform. Yes, I know that Ethiopia, who are not necessarily in the community but our neighbors here, have been struggling with the curriculum reform from the 1980s. At least if you look at the writings of somebody called Vabrus, who has talked about the dramatic movement towards the constructivist approaches to teaching. Yes, I know that Tanzania has also been struggling. But I think Kenya, we have had a most dramatic curriculum reform, and I'll be mentioning a little of the complexities bit navigate. But our curriculum reform process basically entails phasing out the 844 dispensation and phasing in the competency-based curriculum. Now, my wordings there are very deliberate, that we are phasing out a number and we are replacing it with a conceptualization. We are phasing out what we have called the 844 curriculum and phasing it out. And colleagues, when this chapter becomes a reality, that's something I want to belabor. That perhaps in Africa we have concentrated a lot more on the structure of education as defined by numbers and not on a conceptualization of a curriculum. Remember my definition of education and the curriculum. And I want to suggest that the moment you get to concentrate on the numbers, then you are delving into education and you are taking wars that are not your own. And context. Colleagues, there's a thin line between institutionality and administration, and I will tell you this is one of the most difficult things for curriculum developers to engage, and you should always think about it. And of course, even as I talk about this from my experience as CEO, a lot of my staff, and I believe staff in Africa who are curriculum development officers, are young, and we are praying for you to be CEOs, but the most important thing is that in your own unit or department, remember that these are things we are navigating. Now, the government approval process of curricula involves multiple institutional administrative units. I'll pause there and give you an example. Here in Kenya, we develop curricula through a panel system. We in the Institute preside over panel processes of development. When we have developed initial drafts, they go to a team called the course panel, which brings together people from diverse dimensions, including the micro industries, let me say including people who are not in education. Then it goes to the academic committee, it goes to council, but up to that stage, if you think life is difficult, just smile. The problem begins because after that, you have to also convince the Ministry of Education, who is our anchor, because we are an agency, that this is viable, this is implementable. You have to, at some stage, convince the Parliamentary Committee on Education, because those are the custodians of your budget. So if they think you are having too many learning areas and this is going to cost the country this much, if they think CBC is expensive and the resources are not available, if they think for some reason that you are taking the country in a bad direction, and that direction is only bad because it's not consistent with their thoughts, then you have a problem. But it's not over. The Parliamentary Committee on Education takes it to the Budget Committee of the National Assembly. And I can tell you that it doesn't end there. My colleague CEOs here know you actually have to brief, send that brief up to the highest organ in this country. Now, the second part of that point is all those administrative units have various levels of historical, academic, cognitive, institutional, legal orientations and interpretation. So yes, you have sat in the institute, we have had training, ACA has given us a conference, we know IBE has spoken. A number of the units to whom you will be presenting your curricula do not have access to those parts, and perhaps they don't care. They don't even have the vocabulary that you have when you explain what a curriculum is. So one of the things you have to defend, Gertrude, is even why are you calling this a curriculum design and not a syllabus? Why are you confusing the country and telling us that topics are now called strands, and subtopics are now called substrands. What are these things you have called expected learning experiences or such learning experiences? Ladies and gentlemen, that can be suffocating. It's a critical issue to navigate. Then, of course, there is the government ministries versus curriculum development institutions. Here in Kenya, I'll be saying when I come to political navigation, we are lucky that we have a principal secretary who is an educator. We have a cabinet secretary today who is very passionate in education. The previous one we had was an educator himself. But I think most critically, we have a president who has been part of this journey. I'll come back to that later. But we have several multiple semi-autonomous government agencies which have, one, their job descriptions. A lot of government agencies we have in Kenya, and I believe in other countries, are situated within an act of parliament which stipulates their mandate. So we have our mandate as KICD, they also have theirs. Because of those mandates, they have their strategic plans, they have work plans, they have their leadership. Something I've not written there is that they have their territorial jurisdictions which they have to protect. A colleague of ours, I think I've seen him walk in, yesterday was asking, what happens between basic education and universities? The main problem is jurisdictional mandate. That if you look at the mandate of KICD, we are supposed to develop curricula for all levels of education except the university. And my colleagues will remember, yes, universities develop their own senate. And so, when you see an act of parliament, when you see mandates, even funding is based on that. That's why we cannot make an initiative to start telling universities, we have developed a competence-based curriculum, can you align? That is meant for another semi-autonomous government agency. And if you touch on it, you will get a letter sent to the head of public service, copied to you as a CEO, explaining why you want to be a super CEO who is usurping the roles of other jurisdictions. So it's something you have to, and I'll give you a basic example. Another one. Our colleagues from Teacher Service Commission were here yesterday, I wish they were here today, that we develop curricula, but somebody else is responsible for training teachers, including capacity building of those teachers towards the curriculum. And I think more critically, funding therefore goes to those institutions variously. So as a curriculum developer, this is something that a lot of times you have to navigate. I gave you the example of TVET earlier on. And one of the dramas in this country, which I will capture in this book, is we have a Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. We have a Kenya National Examinations Council, but we also have a Center for Certification, Assessment, and Curriculum Development. So you have to navigate now. Where does mine start and end? Where does it move? Unfortunately for us, if I may give you the example of the Institute, we are the people who are known out there. So we are blamed for everything, including why there should be activity fees in schools. But they are therefore intra-institutional. I want to give you another interesting one. Colleagues, curriculum development CEOs, even within your institutions, and I call it intra. I'm a student of conflict management, and you know we have organizational conflict, we have group conflict, we have interpersonal conflict, but we also have intra. So even within an institution, you have to also prepare yourself that you have to navigate a lot of things. And one of the few sentences I will have in my chapter, Dr. Kurgat, I don't know if it has happened to some of you. You go into an institution as a CEO, and this is meant to prepare others, and sometimes you are an outsider. You have been lecturing at the university for the last 16 years. You come here and find people who have been curriculum development officer for the last 20 years. So who are you? What is it you are going to start telling them about curriculum development? And it happens also to new officers, because we employ new officers who I can tell you are very vibrant. But elsewhere, there are people also tell you, hey, you came here recently. It is worse in Kiswahili. Wewe ulikuja juzi. Sometimes they will even go on, I'll translate that. Wewe uliletwa na director juzi. You were just brought by the director the other day. What are you going to tell us about the curriculum development? So again, even as a CEO, you have to be very conscious of the fact that sometimes good ideas can be stifled right in the institution. And you have to find a way of navigating it, because remember, both the stiflers and the stifled are also your officers. And you have to deal with that so that at the end of the day, you rally people towards the same line. I'll give you a cheap example. Would you know that even to host this conference, you've got to really convince all your officers that this is something that is necessary for an institution and that they should spend a whole week doing, instead of concentrating on some field activities which perhaps would have come with some financial gains. Hello? That subject doesn't seem to be very popular. Let me run away to another. Okay, the last slide. Yes, the most interesting bit. So, just as we go there, my colleagues for basic education also have a contribution to make. Please invite us. When you do, like some universities have done, you will realize that we know what we are doing, we have researched it, we have read about it, and that we have gone to school. And where is Busheru again? Yes, just the other day we were at another university, and they appreciated where we had come from. But what are the people comfortable? In politics, there are people called the people. In Kenya here, we call them wananchi. I don't know what you call them in your country. What do the people want? It is not what do the people need. You can sit in your curriculum development institute and conceptualize what you think people need, and usually don't just wake up and think about it. You will have put a lot of money into something we did in this country called needs analysis for curriculum reform. And indeed, anything we do in curriculum development in the world and here also is based on needs analysis. Remember, the word is need. But the politicians do not want to hear what the people need. It's what the people want. If you give people a chance, they will tell you we don't want to go to school. As long as they can earn, they can eat, they can have children. So, navigating what the people want versus what the people need is something you as curriculum developers have really deal with. But remember also, even some of the people articulating what the people want are not really sure what the people want. Sometimes it's a question of what does the dominant leader, what is the dominant leader perceived to want? In this country, and in some parts of the country which are not mentioned, in the year 2010, when a new constitution was being conceptualized, a lot of people, including the students I used to teach at the university, I used to teach communication skills, and among the students I used to teach were students of law. So I would go to them and ask them, how many of you have read the draft constitution? And even some people at that level tell me, so and so has read it for us, so we shall support what they want. And if you want to know, as recent as August, September, October this year, the question of what curriculum do the Kenyans want still featured prominently in Kenyan politics. And people picked on the number 3. What are we able to understand? Many people out there, colleagues, I want to tell you, will pick on what they are able to understand from their frame of reference. And this is a delicate issue you have to navigate. The reality that Aristotle talked about long ago in the year 1910, that you could loosely categorize human beings into 3 main groups. We have workers, yes, who they put at about 80%. Then we have soldiers, whom they put at about 15%. Then we have thinkers. You and I can pride here that we are the thinkers of where we need to take this country. You can define it, you can explain it, you can assess it. But how many of your consumers understand it at the level? Some to navigate. But there is also politics the world over. There is always the government and the opposition, and it becomes more critical when, during those short moments when there's no government and people are campaigning. It's a question of this other side seems to be the main proponents of this curriculum. What is it that they are hiding that they will ambush us with? So therefore, what aspects of their proposals can we pick which will help us to hit them? And there are many things to pick. In some school, teachers will have asked children for chicken or for eggs. It's something that is very sweet political discourse, isn't it? This curriculum is so expensive, it is making teachers to make so many demands, including demanding for chicken from parents. Another one, which I'll give you and then I'll stop there. My people here would have sat at this corner through international benchmarking and they'll say parental engagement and empowerment is very important. So we shall always give tasks that will call on parents to be involved with their children's learning. Serious political platform language. In Kenya here, when you want to address people and agitate them, you start by saying, Harambe! And then they say, hey, Harambe! Now I'll tell you why this curriculum is bad. Parents are not teachers. Parents, especially in the night, are supposed to be doing adult things. They are supposed to be giving birth to children who will be professors like me. But now we have a curriculum in the house, which is forcing parents, instead of concentrating on doing adult things, they are now doing homework for children up to midnight. They are waking up at dawn. In my language, that dawn is a very serious time because people believe kings are born. Now, yet colleagues, curriculum development institutions must do one thing. You must always get the political goodwill. I think that's another chapter we must get. How do you navigate it? And I can tell you, when parliamentarians are in the House, those opposition and government are not there. They work together. So you must always work to get the goodwill of both the government and the opposition, so that when a debate is on the floor of the House, they perhaps could speak for you. And I believe, my colleagues here, curriculum development officers, you have been in situations, hey, how long have I talked? Okay, I must shut up now. You have been in situations where, when you know something on the curriculum is coming up, you must lobby parliamentarians. And that is important. There's nothing wrong with it. In this country, politically, I can be here and tell you the person who has saved the competency-based curriculum is the head of state, President William Samoei Ruto. One, because he's an academic, but two, because deep down, as a scientist himself, he appreciated from the beginning where this curriculum was supposed to go. Otherwise, the political dimension was going to ruin us. And this is something that I have been able to express, fortunately after. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I just speak on one thing because I'm conscious I've talked for too long. ACA. All those multiple contexts that are presented, we have an opportunity, and this could be one of our declarations, to insulate curriculum developers or any other academics charged with the responsibility of giving us a plan for competence for the future, to insulate ourselves. Are we able to come up through UNESCO, through IBE, with parameters that any curriculum development initiative has to meet, are we able to lobby through AU the fact that a curriculum development ought to be peer reviewed by stakeholders of the continent, so that one of the things I would do in Kenya is that once we have developed a curriculum, we could have representation through ACA who says, yes, we have peer reviewed this curriculum and we think it is good for the 21st century. Then we may just limit our politicians. And if that pronouncement can be made through our education office at AU, that might just insulate us against people locally who think that they still have the local stand-eye to manipulate that curriculum and tell you this direction to go. What stops us, Africa, from thinking about a set of core learning areas at pre-primary, at primary, at junior school, at senior school, that every curriculum ought to manifest? And therefore, if Niger, Mali, Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda doesn't have it, the African Union can have a voice and say, no, we think that there's something missing. What stops us from saying that at the end of the day, what we are looking for are sustainable futures? And if you're looking for sustainable futures, these are the core ingredients of a curriculum, the core stages of a curriculum reform. So I'm looking at ACA as a very potentially powerful body that we can unite together and say, yes, we are that singular voice in Africa which can review curricula developed in Africa and ask ourselves whether they are able to take us towards our African Agenda 2063, even as we endeavor to meet the sustainable. I want to apologize. The person who was chairing my session is my staff. She didn't have the courage to stop me.
Today he was not speaking as the CEO, though I thought sometimes he would deviate kidogo.
Interesting. Now that problems have to be solved digitally, yet our resources don't allow. And I thought I wanted to bring a team here who will present just a 5-minute demonstration that captures that dilemma. It's one of the programs that we have approved at the Institute as a way of giving us something to think about as we go out and at the end of the conference. So Lydia, my indulgence. And this one I've begged, I'm on my knees, but I think at the end of the day, you'll see why I insisted on bringing them along. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. His presentation, therefore, is not yet over until his co-presenter finishes, after which I'll still ask for 5 minutes. If you have any reactions to what he has said, I'll give about 2 or 3 people to respond and ask any questions, so that once he leaves the stage, he will leave the stage, but not answer while he's there. He'll answer while here. So, co-presenter of the director, Karibu.
Thank you very much. Standing on the shoulders of giant Professor Ongondo, distinguished delegates. We are from Codris Africa, an education technologies company that presented material for consideration by Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development for approval, for use to teach primary and secondary students how to code. Digital skills as prescribed by CBC go way beyond the basic use of a computer, which means what I might do when I'm using Word or PowerPoint presentation and so on, but teach them how to program computers. You may know that coding is one issue that are laid out well there. Creates a nexus between, with a guidance.
To give you a quick rundown of how the platform looks like and where the learners do the actual coding. And the platform is online, and ideally learners start with simple tasks and then they grow in complexity as they move on. So ideally, we're in the first task of our 6th grader, and we start by this task of our 6th grader, and we start by looking at the learner's guide. We are supposed to move animal characters and fetch certain objects. So we'll go back into the platform and try and solve that. So in this case, we have a bunny, a rabbit, and we're supposed to move it from where it is all the way to where we have that circle. So to do that, we are going to tell it using the Python programming language to move forward 3 steps. 3 steps. And then once we get to the corner, we need to turn to our right. So we need to turn right. And then we move forward 3 steps for the last fetch. The 2 bears and fetch a piece of carrot. But in this case, the condition is that the bears have to be sleeping. So we are going to make use of a conditional statement, if else. So we are going to use blocks of code. So you can either use blocks of code or write the code in code mode. So ggraph. So we are going to start with what we call a for loop, which is used when you have repetitive processes in programming. And then ggraph. So we'll have to wait a couple of seconds for each bear to sleep. After waiting, we check if the bears have slept. And if the bears have slept, we can move forward and fetch the pieces of carrots. So we'll click on run. So we'll wait a couple of seconds. Once it sleeps, we move. Once the second one sleeps as well, we move forward and fetch the piece of carrot. So we also got that correct, and we got 3 stars. So finally, I'm going to show you a complex task. So this is still in grade 6, the second last topic, which is called return statements. And by the time the learners are getting to this point, they've been introduced to a lot of concepts in Python programming, and some of those include functions, variables, repeat statements. We also have for loops, the conditional statements if we've just had a look at, and now the return statement we are looking at. So just to convert this to something that might be used out there, so we'll take an example of an ATM or a mobile banking app. So we'll assume that the dog in this case is our ATM, and the dog is supposed to fetch a couple of pieces of meat. We'll assume the pieces of meat is the money in your account. So we'll click on run to see what the dog does. So ideally, after the process is done, the return statement is supposed to tell us how many pieces of meat it has collected. In the scenario of an ATM, that's supposed to tell us the amount you have in your bank account. So in this case, the dog tells us that we have an account balance of $30,000. Yeah. So ideally, in the curriculum designs, coding has been introduced, just as my CEO was saying, to try and bridge this movement from the manual way of doing things to the digital way of doing things. So it has been introduced in subjects such as ICT, science and technology, and it strengthens competencies such as problem solving, design thinking, and innovation. And as you can see, that example of an ATM is just one of the ways that children can use these concepts to conceptualize a digital technology. So without taking too much time, I'd like to thank you for your attention. We need to empower children to be more digital producers rather than consumers. Thank you.
We call that stimulus variation, where after the context that were given to us by the director, now we have some stimulus variation before he comes back and gives us, you receive at least 2 or 3 comments or questions that he can respond to. Thank you so much, Kodris, on coding or what has been shown to us. We have and see or ask any questions regarding what you have just seen. Thank you for that brief, and I thank you for keeping time. So I have one question. I want to receive questions for the CEO before we break for tea. That is 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Those are enough. Okay? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 at the back. Pass on, Lillian, pass the mic. Director, kindly receive these questions because you will just come back here for another 5 minutes to answer all of them together before we break for tea. So let's start with 1. Who was number 1? Yeah. Yeah, just the way I numbered you. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I really just want to appreciate your presentation was absolutely essential building block in this organization and around Africa. So really, thank you so much. It was truly enlightening to hear what you have to say. It's just absolutely amazing. I do believe that everyone took a note. You took a note what he was saying, because this man is a wise man. This man has a lot of I really appreciate and would like to talk to you about something, what we do. Maybe we can work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, that's 1. Number 2. Yeah, number 2 is in front here. That's a compliment, a good one. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair of the session, and thanks, Professor, for that great presentation. Your experiences in Kenya, I've always seen that I was in Uganda. Actually, I just wanted to give a little bit of supplement what you were saying. You talked about the context, academic cognitive context, and you talked about the challenges of assessment and where people think that there must be the summative, when actually summative is just assessment of learning. Now, for us, we are at crossroads because the public is interested in reporting learners' achievement by grading. And you know, CBC does not foster grading of learners because you're looking at the learner's competence acquisition as an individual, and you're not comparing this learner to the other one. So we are now, you know, like you said, the political leadership and then the other stakeholders can force you to do what is not supposed to be done because that's their will. So we are yet to conclude that, but the voice can be heard that we must grade. We must continue grading and say, first grade, they have this amount, second grade, third grade. We were saying that's not the way we should be doing it. We should just give these learners their results, and we expand achievement on that continuum which we developed up to assessment, and also had challenges in 2016. We thought we were done. We had strands, and we were told no, we don't want strands, and these were university lecturers, professors. They said we want topics. You're bringing new terms. Words and terms which are going to confuse the public. And so we are implementing a competence-based curriculum, but we are talking about topics. So the political, the stakeholders, the context can really be so challenging. And like you said, I want to agree, you must understand who matters. You may be the technocrats who know it all. But if the people you're taking the curriculum to do not appreciate and understand, they will still say, we don't want that. Yeah. In the seminar we thought we would roll out in 2017, we had to go back because they said, you go and remove learning areas, we want subjects. Yes. So we went back to the drawing board, unpacked the learning areas, went back to subjects, and when it came to 2020 rollout, the parliament went in arms and said, we don't want the new curriculum. We don't understand it, it's confusing us, what is competence, what is learning outcomes, blah, blah, blah. So we again now had to lobby. And I had to talk about the lobby. To the extent that we had to go to His Excellency, through the Honorable Minister, who have been good enough, we had an opportunity, and it's His Excellency who had to talk to the parliament. That's yesterday, not only in the process I believe across Africa, it could be the same experience. But it's so good to learn, and we you further and you give us insights on how to move forward. But I thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ray.
My name is Bernadette from Uganda. Sorry.
Thank you, Bernadette. And Dr. Gertrude, you are number 3. Yeah. Or you want to share the same thing now that you come from the same country? Let's hit it straight on the head. Gertrude, let's go.
Yeah, I would like to thank Professor for that wonderful presentation. I also want to request Professor to share the document, the books, so that we keep them at our office, the office in Uganda. Then another.
The curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the National Registration Framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
In this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being fair to our young ones the way we do assessment today? The way we glorify examinations.
A curriculum has to have a technical name that is known and accepted within the entire world.
For that. That's a comment from the ACA office, and there was number 4. Was it yours? Number 4 was somewhere here. Number 4 was over there. And if the presenter who has 5 minutes will surrender 1 minute, he will allow you. Meanwhile, thank you. When he comes, he'll wrap all this up, but very good comments. Uganda, ACA office, and appreciation there. Let's hear what you're going to tell us, and tell us your name and where you come from.
Thank you very much. I'm Frederick Sembara from Uganda.
Thank you.
My question to the professor is where you say that media or commission modern institution is produce the document, but whether the schools have things is not your business. Do you think there your council would not have done their work? Because normally, according to the council, it is constituted in such a way that you have people in the schools, teachers, so they're supposed to guide you before the document come out. Then the second question is this overemphasis on what to study and how to study. But the why question, if it's not solved, that's why you find that in that political dilemma of approval. Normally we begin with the what and the how, and you know the why. Why are we educating people? Are we educating them to get jobs? Are we educating them to be elite? That's why question is not settled. That's why every politician will have to resist what we propose.
Thank you. I was going to allow only 4, and I think all these 4 came from Uganda. Where do you come from? Uganda also? In that case, I will allow him, because I don't think he's from Uganda, to give us the 5th. Just give him the mic. He had raised his hand, but that will be the last, ladies and gentlemen. Then I will take us for directors for tea. Yes, I will allow him. I don't know that he'll ask in French, because I don't know the director will understand.
Then he will translate.
Okay. Bonjour. Where is Mudengi?
Yes, get a volunteer to translate.
Moi, je veux parler en français. Je
My...
voudrais savoir comment vous allez me comprendre. Parce que vous n'avez pris aucune disposition pour que nous puissions échanger avec vous. Vous êtes une association africaine de curriculum. Ce n'est pas une association anglophone de curriculum. Et il faudrait que les conditions soient réunies pour que nous puissions échanger. Si vous devriez tout simplement parler en anglais, et que hier, quand vous prenez hier la seule question qui a été posée par un francophone, la partie de réponse, je voudrais savoir comment nous allons échanger. Moi, je crois qu'il va falloir rectifier les choses pour que la carte devienne véritablement rassemble l'ensemble des Africains, et l'ensemble des Africains, c'est des francophones, c'est des lusophones, c'est des anglophones, etc. Sinon, vous allez inviter les gens à des instances comme l'ACA qui vont tout simplement vous regarder, alors que nous sommes venus pour échanger avec eux. Donc, il faudrait que ce soit un véritable cadre d'échange et non pas un cadre où nous allons tout simplement recevoir ce que vous avez. Ça, c'est mon observation. Maintenant, je voudrais très sincèrement remercier le professeur pour la brillante intervention qu'il vient de faire et qui est, à mon avis, doit être entendue par l'ensemble des personnalités et des interlocuteurs ici. Parce que aujourd'hui, ce qui doit nous réunir, c'est de créer les conditions pour que nous ayons une voie unique pouvant sortir nos systèmes éducatifs respectifs des difficultés dans lesquelles nous sommes aujourd'hui. Et je crois que son intervention nous donne l'occasion de réfléchir sur la solution à trouver ensemble. Parce que il faut qu'on se dise une chose. Si nous voulons sortir du système éducatif des problèmes dans lesquels ils vivent, il faudrait que nous agissions ensemble. Il faudrait que nous développions, nous mettions nos expériences ensemble. Il faudrait que nous mutualisions tout ce que nous avons à mettre ensemble. Nos pays en Afrique pris isolement ne peuvent pas faire face aux défis multiples qui se posent dans le système éducatif. Mais seulement, professeur, la question que je voudrais poser, et je voudrais vous poser, lorsqu'on regarde la conclusion de votre intervention, vous avez appelé à une unification du curriculum en Afrique. Il faudrait aller vers la création d'un ensemble qui donnerait un sens à l'éducation en Afrique, parce que quelque part, nous partageons tous les mêmes valeurs. Il faudrait que nos systèmes éducatifs se décolonisent et aillent vers la création de véritables valeurs africaines. Mais la question que je voudrais vous poser, professeur, comment cette initiative peut-elle être possible lorsque, en Afrique, nous n'avons pas encore réglé les problèmes les plus élémentaires? L'unification du curriculum en Afrique va nécessairement passer par l'unification de l'unité africaine. Tant que les choses les plus élémentaires ne sont pas réglées au niveau interne, nous ne pouvons pas penser vers l'unification du curriculum. Aujourd'hui, beaucoup de participants ne sont pas là parce qu'ils n'ont pas eu de visa. Voilà la réalité de l'Afrique. Voilà les réalités qu'il faut régler. Il faudrait que les frontières soient ouvertes. Il faut que la réflexion soit ouverte. Il faudrait que les valeurs soient ouvertes pour que nous puissions passer d'un pays à un autre, pour qu'il n'y ait pas de blocage, pour décongestionner, pour décoloniser nos esprits. Sinon, nous allons nous retrouver entre intellectuels ici, dans les grandes salles, discuter des problèmes du système éducatif qui ne les a pas réglés. Parce que la question du curriculum pose la question de nos comportements. Si nous voulons créer, aller vers l'initiative de mettre en place un véritable curriculum en Afrique, il faudrait d'abord régler les questions à la base. Il faudrait que, quelque part, nous créions les conditions pour que partout, nous puissions nous sentir africains. Je répète qu'aujourd'hui, beaucoup de nos collègues ne sont pas dans cette salle-là parce qu'ils n'ont pas eu de visa. Tant que les questions comme ça ne sont pas réglées, est-ce que nous pouvons parler de quelque chose? Merci.
I had a little towards the end, but the English part, at first it was not there, but Merci beaucoup. I want to ask that we get his last 5 minutes to respond to this. Some were generally comments, and thank you so much for those questions we have asked. I think he was very passionate about an inability to come because of no open borders as in Africa, and participation. What I had, he had, so he's coming to respond. CEO, kindly come and respond to that. We take our 5 minutes so that we take our tea break. Oh, you had a question? Please let it wait. Oh, a comment, eh? You are who and from where? Not from Uganda again, eh? You're from here? Malawi. Oh, Malawi. Let's allow Malawi one comment. Make it very brief, yeah, in the interest of time, so that, CEO, you're getting ready, eh? Yeah, he's coming. Kindly.
Thank you very much,
Let me appeal to the one interpreting up there to make it faster for that team. We kept a bit not communicating, so now you can start translating again. They were also complaining they were not very hearing at the beginning or understanding. Yeah, come up, Malawi.
So that was a very rich presentation, very practical ideas and solutions. I wanted to learn from you, starting from your wisdom, when it comes to navigating the context. The greatest challenge that I've experienced is when government departments or directorates within the Ministry of Education now coming to the Curriculum Development Center, taking up the roles of the Curriculum Development Center, stepping on the mandate, but also navigating where we have international organizations, very powerful, very rich, with a lot of dollars. They come and other unwarranted entities in curriculum development. They come and some of them, they say about the Curriculum Development Center to drive the agenda, which is completely different from the agenda of the Curriculum Development Center, but simply because they have money and it becomes a very difficult situation to navigate. So I just wanted to learn from you
Directors, you come, some of these questions, let's answer them in the plenary in the afternoon so that it just comes and wraps up. As he comes, we will take only 3 minutes now, then he wraps up, then we can be able to break. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moshero. We'll reduce this even to 2 minutes, but allow me, I saw a colleague CEO, Dr. Joel Mabonga, the Chief Executive Officer, School Equipment Production Unit, come in. Please give him a hand and welcome him. Dr. Mabonga was one of us here at KICD as Senior Deputy Director, Corporate Services. We are happy to have you. Thanks, colleagues, for all your compliments, and particularly Gertrude and Bernadette. One of the things I could do is to open up this book so that colleagues from other countries, you could contribute chapters so that perhaps the book, when it comes out, carries experiences from other countries. We can sit together. I know we have a forum to see how to do this. Yes, I need publication points to get my promotion from associate professor to full professor, but I know that it will also add me credit if we have contributions and I elevate myself to the level of editor. So thank you very much. I think we shall do that. But the experiences are similar and they are interesting to think about. So I think the main question then, hey, I'm very excited about the colleague who said I'm a wise man. Hey, colleagues, these people at the institute look at me and just take me for granted. You have heard it today. So I think one of the main questions that has featured is from Felix. When we say that we don't care much about resources in the field, it is somebody else's responsibility. That is what I mean. And not the responsibility of a curriculum development officer. But put more academically, our role as a curriculum development institute is responding to a vision, which is your question why, and providing direction. Actually, a curriculum is not made for today. When you design a curriculum, you are thinking about where the country will be 30 years to come. So then it is the responsibility of other organs of government to provide resources to take us there. You have a house to build because it is, but somebody else has the responsibility to provide the resources for that house. So we always take care of the question, why are we developing a curriculum? If you look at all our curriculum designs, they have one powerful, one paragraph, sometimes two paragraph bit called essence statement. Why do we need this learning area in the curriculum today? So that is critical. An important question raised by Gertrude is then, how do we navigate? I want to say this. In Africa, we are only 60 years old in this game post-independence. Celebrate the gains you have achieved. And admit that you will not always have it your way. I think that's something I've been humbled to accept as a CEO of a curriculum development institute. So there are times they will tell you, remove this subject from the curriculum, humble yourself, because there are no children here. I will say, put your tail between your legs and say, okay, fine, we are happy with what we have got. But this one I'll say on low tones, because you have the interest of the learners at heart. If you feel very strongly about certain strands, find room for them in the other areas. So if they tell you delete, Jane, don't quote me anywhere, delete life skills as an independent learning area or subject from the curriculum, what stops you from creating a room for it in social studies? The learners will still not have lost. Now, a most pertinent and critical issue from my colleague from Niger, because I'm a language educator, I pay a lot of attention to body language. And I can see that you are speaking from the heart. And the body was speaking how the heart was beating. And you've spoken powerfully about something that should worry us in this conference. But let me start by speaking to the education bit first. Yes, nothing stops us from thinking about an African curriculum development framework. The East African community, as you are aware, has almost achieved it, because we have an East African Protocol 2012, which came up complete with a framework, and actually is the one that said East African countries ought to adopt a competence-based curriculum, and went ahead even to identify and harmonize qualifications. And it has really, really helped, I can assure you. Sometimes we have rich moments when we tell the country, look, we are signatories to the East African Community Protocol, and if we don't do this, we shall just be disobeying what the rest of the world is doing. So Uganda, you are making good strides, you will get there. But now, my colleague from Niger raises critical questions that they are basics we have to deal with. We still, in the year 2023, treat fellow Africans with a lot of suspicion. People have to get visas to go to neighboring countries. Yet, when you think about our cultures, our values as a people, we really are just one. Those of us who have had opportunities to live abroad, African people are just African people, and we always invited others for real food. You know, there are other people from other continents. When they invite you for dinner, make sure you have some food back in your room to fall back on. But when an African colleague invites you for dinner, you know you will go to eat, and eat properly. So nothing stops us from also working towards removing these barriers. Why should somebody be denied a visa to come to Kenya? Let me just quote from my topic, from Chad, or let's say from the Gambia. These are things that we have to do, and I think our President Ruto, has really picked up this, and is one of the champions for saying we should not really have these barriers that block Africa from the other. So I think as we speak, some strides are being made, and maybe by the end of his term, we shall have opened it up to all African countries. An interesting point you mentioned, and colleagues, let's think about this as day 2 of the conference. Are we just going to be another talk shop? Which conferences are Christians to be? Or we can have some tangible outcomes that we shall take away as ACA. Thank you very much for your comments. From Malawi, my colleagues from the Ministry of Education are here, and you mentioned occasionally attempts to take up roles of curriculum development institutes. I will say yes, these are real. What you do as a curriculum development institute is to do, on my notebook there, yes, Samuel, you can pick one of the leaflets I have there. I'll give you a joke, but it works for me. I work with this card everywhere I go, and I also have online version or digital versions. It captures the functions we are attempting to grab our function. And the first one says, big one, that the Institute has the function to advise the government on all matters pertaining to curriculum development. And so I always produce that by law. And that way I'm able to pacify a number of colleagues sometimes. We can produce one for you and you carry. Because I can assure you, some people get into some spaces, then they think, why is KICD becoming this powerful? They want to grab the credits, but when they think something is going wrong, they say, no, 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 that one, take it to KICD. The publishers are here, and I'll give you an example. When books are being developed, there are organs which will tell you we want to take part in the development of those books. But when books delay in getting to school, they say go and ask the institute. So that's one thing you have to really find careful ways of navigating. But I'll tell you, at the end of the day, even as you remind people of your mandate, do it very politely. Have fora where you say, with all the due respect, I would like to suggest that this is the mandate of the institution. Occasionally, you will go somewhere and you find them presenting your roles as their work. You will find someone talking about how they have developed teacher education curricula. Now they have their upgrade one. Well, those are things we have done here. They are without roles. What about funders and donors? There are some colleagues of mine here who know there are many times when, yes, you have donors who will fund you but tell you, we want this way. I think one thing I want to pride in my colleagues we have succeeded in doing, we have reached moments when we tell donors, you can go away with your money. But we are the people who give you direction on how to go. And my colleague, Eunice, is here. I don't know if Jane Mukuhi is here. She will have to show cause why she's not here. Just very recently, we had some donors funding a function. And, Sister is here. Sister Mutune is here. And we had a serious fight because we were saying we want interactive lessons, interactive video lessons. But these people are creating passive, where the teacher is dominating. And we told them we shall go this way, otherwise, yes, you can take your money and even take materials. So it's something I think you have to maintain a strict stand. Oh, my army has come in with the functions. Curriculum development institutions, CEOs, please have that and always work with it like an identity card. Make sure you give one to George Orido. I want to close by saying, as we talk now, there is an initiative to start harmonization of a lot of our curricula in Africa. Patrick Andika and my counterpart from Burundi is here. The East African community has taken leadership in developing a statistics curriculum for primary schools. Please sit down, Patrick. And this is being done, one curriculum for East African countries. I know that my colleague, the statistician from the university, is wondering why statistics at primary school level. But one of the reasons for this is demystify some of these things. Inferential statistics, I know you talk about chi-square, z-test, and so on, but there are aspects of statistics that we can start socializing our learners with, even at primary school level, so that when we introduce them at the university level, children don't look at them and say, that is for some professors, it's not for us. And it is working. It's doing very well. I think that's the kind of thing we need to promote as Africa, as I close, so that whatever learning areas we have, can we share what content is there? Yesterday, our minister from Ghana mentioned something that I have taken away. What is that one book that we think every learner going through our curriculum in Africa, I want to suggest, should read? And one of the things I think our learners should think about is a bit of African history. When I was a student in school, I did West African history. So I know about Sundiata, I know about the Kingdom of Mali, and so on. And of course, at A levels later on, I did French history. And it was really, really important being able to juxtapose African history, because the French history was talking about the number of shoes Louis Antoinette, Louis V's wife used to have. And we were told she had 3,000 pairs of shoes. And I was comparing that to how Shaka of Zulu and people like Sundiata were fighting and to get us independence. Thank you very much, colleagues, and let the conversation continue. Asante sana.
Thank you, CEO. Our guests, and if you want further interaction with the CEO, he's a very free person. You can interact with him anytime, ask anything else or any other comment. And he is abroad for this conference, so he's not going back to the office. That is, that's what you said. He's abroad, so he's not in the office. He's around and available. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll now come to the end of that session. We will break for tea. Our tea is served here. And I want to just ask our colleagues that if behind you is a visitor, go behind the visitor.
The curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the National Registration Framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
In this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being fair to our young ones the way we do assessment today? The way we glorify examinations.
A curriculum has to have a technical name that is known and accepted within the entire world.
The essence of education in our definition as curriculum developers is that you should be able to adapt to different situations all through your life.
The curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the National Registration Framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
In this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being
curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the national registration framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
In this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being fair to our young ones the way we do assessment today? The way we glorify examinations.
A curriculum has to have a technical name that is known and accepted within the entire world.
The essence of education in our definition as curriculum developers is that you should be able to adapt to different situations all through your life.
Curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the national registration framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
In this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being fair to our young ones the way we do assessment today? The way we glorify examinations.
A curriculum has to have a technical name that is known and accepted within the entire world.
The essence of education in our definition as curriculum developers is that you should be able to adapt to different situations all through your life.
Curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the national registration framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
In this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being fair to our young ones the way we do assessment today? The way we glorify examinations.
A curriculum has to have a technical name that is known and accepted within the entire world.
The essence of education in our definition as curriculum developers is that you should be able to adapt to different situations all through your life.
Curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the national registration framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
Thank you for watching Edu TV.
Education is key. Education to develop a nation. Education giving every learner the material for learning. KICD, every stage from ECD. KICD, shule ya msingi na ya upili. KICD, mahitaji maalum na waalimu. KICD, for your curriculum. KICD.
The Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, nurturing every learner's potential.
Thank you for watching Edu TV.
Education is key. Education to develop a nation. Education giving every learner the material for learning. KICD, every stage from ECD. KICD, shule ya msingi na ya upili. KICD, mahitaji maalum na waalimu. KICD, for your curriculum. KICD.
The Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, nurturing every learner's potential.
Thank you for watching Edu TV.
Education is key. Education to develop a nation. Education giving every learner the material for learning. KICD, every stage from
Royal University, Uganda, Kampala. I'm a lecturer of geography, but I teach teachers. And I've been able to interact with the teachers. So that is where I basically picked the interest of this topic. The teachers and students' perception of the school-based formative assessment of the new lower secondary school curriculum. So when it comes to formative assessment, definitely a powerful tool that has been adopted. And then of course, like we've heard, it is a component of the educational reforms that has been adopted because of the shortcomings of summative assessment. We are looking at helping learners learn how to learn, and we are shifting from the tradition of summative assessment as far as my country is concerned, like most of the countries based on what I have heard. And so from a tradition of summative assessment, our study is basically focusing on shedding light on what is happening as far as formative assessment of the new lower school secondary curriculum. And it was carried out in central Uganda, like I've said, in 2 districts, that is Chankwanzi and Wakiso. So you find that our study, we focused on a theory, which is the social cognitive theory, which is basically about the socializing of the teachers with the learners, how they're interacting in the formative assessment, in the academia, while the teaching and learning is going on. And then of course we are looking at the role of the administrators as well, and then even other stakeholders in relation to what they're supposed to be playing in formative assessment. So we are talking about this in the context of collaborative exchange through the learning experiences, informal formative assessment where a teacher is engaging the learner and the teacher is key. However, the learner is at the center of assessment. Will they be able to hear me? Okay.
Stand here.
Then we have the objectives of the study, where we focused on investigating the perceptions of the teachers regarding formative assessment of the new lower secondary school curriculum. Then we have determining the perceptions of the learners regarding the formative assessment of the new lower secondary school curriculum, and the challenges faced by both the teachers and the learners in writing and conducting of formative assessment. So those are the objectives that we focused on. And then the hypothesis, we have the teachers and pupils have a negative perception of formative assessment, and the teachers and the learners do not face any challenges as far as implementation of formative assessment of the new lower secondary school curriculum is concerned. So when it comes to the methodology, we focused on 13 schools. These schools were chosen based on the performance, the UCE performance of 2022. So we chose one which was considered to be the best performer among the best performing districts, that was Wachiso, and the least performing, that was Chankwanzi. For us to be able to get the perspective of the background in relation to the performance, which is basically not overemphasized as far as formative assessment is concerned. And then we used an explanatory sequential mixed methods design, a 5-point Likert scale questionnaire to a random sample size. And then we had focus group discussions and then key informat interviews. Those were basically for the challenges. And then we carried out the Convergence alpha statistics to determine the reliability. And we established that the reliability was 88%, so the study was viable. And then, of course, quantitative data we used in analysis, we used SPSS version 20, then descriptive statistics. We were used to address the perceptions of formative assessment for the learners as well as the students. Then the challenges we gathered via focus group, that is something I've already talked about. And then the qualitative data was written down the way it was transcribed into a verbatim mode based on nothing was changed as far as the information collected was concerned. It was presented the way it was given to us from those that were interviewed and from the focus group discussions. And then the results show that the teachers and the students, they actually acknowledge that formative assessment is indeed good for in achieving of the learners, and even the learners themselves, they said that they benefit from formative assessment in terms of them participating in the teaching and learning process, so they end up gaining. And then the teachers also said, of course, it helps in the learners to achieve, and they're able to interact with their learners in the process of assessing them in form of formative assessment. However, majority implied that they were not able to recognize formative assessment, that they were not well equipped as well as teaching as far as assessing formative assessment is concerned, and that it was not timetabled. And the learners as well, also their perception was that formative assessment, when the teachers are administering, they are not consistent, and Some of the teachers do not administer formative assessment at all. So basically, those were the perceptions from the respondents. Then we have the challenges. So in terms of the challenges, some of the teachers expressed that they were not actually so knowledgeable about formative assessment, so they were not understanding what actually formative assessment was all about. And then, of course, they expressed concerns of financial constraints in terms of the materials that they were supposed to be using, and the aspect of limited time vis-a-vis the large class size, reaching out to all learners to ensure that they were engaged in the formative assessment was tricky for them because of the time. Moreover, they had issues of the bulk, the workload, moving on from one class to the other, so it is hard for them to administer the formative assessment. And then the learners expressed concern about the delayed feedback from the teachers, and their concern was that sometimes they undertake new assignments when actually those ones that were previously done have not been returned to, the feedback has not yet been returned. And then there is a problem of a challenge of absenteeism, where you find that some learners, especially in Changwanzi, which is basically a village setting, the learners are involved in activities, especially when it comes to the rainy season, going to the gardens, the markets. So you find that they are on and off when it comes to classroom attendance, which makes it difficult in terms of assessing them through formative assessment. And then also poor record-keeping skills. The teachers had that issue in relation to the technology as far as utilizing formative assessment is concerned. Then, basically this study provides a valuable insight into the implementation and reception of formative assessment practices in the local education context. And the teachers, and despite all the formative assessment and how valuable it was noted that teachers and students still favor summative over formative assessment. And we asked actually one of the teachers, and I understood when the previous speaker was talking about the performance and how the parents like to testify about the performance of their learners. And to me, I felt home that it is not actually only in Uganda, because when we asked some of the teachers, they told us that they were fulfilling the expectations from the parents, that the parents expected their learners to be performing. And some of them said, you know what, for us we are in private institutions. So in a private institution, the parent will threaten you, if you don't give me results, you're giving me what I don't understand, I'm taking my child away. So they are simply fulfilling the expectations from the clients. So basically, they are still emphasizing summative assessment, despite the value of formative assessment. So when it comes to the recommendation, our study was basically based in central Uganda, but future research could focus on a nationwide study to shed a clearer picture, and then also examine the relationship between students' perceptions of formative assessment and how the learners engage in learning. And then also there is need to indeed keep on re-echoing the necessity and purpose of formative assessment with the support of all relevant stakeholders. Thank you for listening.
I think she deserves a better clap. Thank you. We are giving chance to 2 comments or 2 people to give us feedback. Just have a seat. Have a seat. Do we have feedback or comment? Madam there and the gentleman. 3. Okay. Let's make them be quick. Do you have a microphone? Okay. Can you share the topic slide? Microphone, do you have a microphone around? Okay, madam, start with your comment.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. I was just interested in one of the findings where you say that the teachers and the learners prefer summative assessment.
The curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the National Registration Framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
In this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being fair to our young ones the way we do assessment today? The way we glorify examinations.
A curriculum has to have a technical name that is known and accepted within the entire world.
The essence of education in our definition as curriculum developers is that you should be able to adapt to different situations all through your life.
C'est bon pour la traduction? Ok. Donc, merci madame pour votre communication. Et en parlant de l'évaluation automatique, vous avez dit que les enseignants ne sont pas très motivés pour l'évaluation. Parce que nous n'avons pas acquis la méthodologie. Et de même,
the volume is low.
ils ne peuvent pas, pendant ce temps, évaluer tous les élèves. Est-ce que le but de la formation évaluative, de l'évaluation formative, est-ce que son but c'est d'évaluer à la fin tous les élèves ou bien de prendre juste un échantillon d'une dizaine d'élèves et de les évaluer? Merci. Est-ce qu'elle a suivi la traduction? Apparemment, elle a compris. Je reprends la question. Est-ce que le but de l'évaluation formative est d'évaluer tous les élèves de la classe ou bien de prendre un échantillon? Non? No traduction.
Hello.
Approach is to assess some of the or all of it.
Okay, thank you. Then the lady here.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a good presentation from Madam. Thank you very much. My concern is just about the You have mentioned some of the challenges that from your research that you have mentioned. Majority of the teachers are favoring the summative assessment rather than the formative. My question is, or my concern is, what is the status of that assessment in Uganda, or about the background as at now? Yeah.
Thank you. There is a lady here.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your presentation. Actually, it's a way we're supposed to adapt formal assessment, especially if we need to implement competence-based curriculum. So in Kenya, we've really been trying to do that, but we are seeing the challenges like the way you saw.
In this curriculum reform, we shall be looking at the whole question of assessment. Are we being fair to our young ones the way we do assessment today? The way we glorify examinations.
A curriculum has to have a technical name that is known and accepted within the entire world.
The essence of education in our definition as curriculum developers is that you should be able to adapt to different situations all through your life.
Curriculum reforms are being undertaken within the National Registration Framework as informed by Article 53 of the Constitution, which recognizes free and compulsory basic education as a right of every child.
The Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, nurturing every learner's potential.
Thank you for watching Edu TV.
Education is key. Education to develop a nation. Education giving every learner the material for learning. KICD, every stage from ECD. KICD, shule ya msingi na ya upili. KICD, mahitaji maalum na walimu. KICD, for your curriculum. KICD.
The Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, nurturing every learner's potential.
Thank you for watching Edu TV.
Education is key. Education to develop a nation. Education giving every learner the material for learning. KICD, every stage from ECD. KICD, shule ya msingi na ya upili. KICD, mahitaji maalum na walimu. KICD, for your curriculum. KICD.
The Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, nurturing every learner's potential.
Thank you for watching Edu TV.
Education is key. Education to develop a nation. Education giving every material for learning. KICD, every stage from ECD. KICD, shule ya msingi na ya upili. KICD, mahitaji maalum na walimu. KICD, for your curriculum. KICD.
The Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, nurturing every learner's potential.
Thank you for watching Edu TV.
Such big luminaries, we are learning a lot. Please, with the permission of the moderator, I would, before I make my contributions towards her presentation, I would wish to speak to the question on whether CBC has been implemented in the whole of Kenya. I think that was asked. Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, I hope the translation can pick what I'm saying. I wish to confirm that CBC has been implemented in the whole country, in the 47 counties of Kenya. Kenya is administratively divided into 47 counties. And in all these counties, this is one of the major successes of CBC, that it has been implemented. And this was proven in 2015 by a study that was run by Professor Iro, where he confirmed that at that point, CBC was up and running, despite the little challenges that we are all facing, those of us who are in the process of implementing this new system. So it is running, and that I can say is one of the major successes of CBC in Kenya. And that even at this point, as we speak, we have our cohort who already sat for their grade 6, and they had a seamless transition into grade 7. We didn't have anxieties of parents running for schools, you know, all those issues that come with the movement from primary to secondary. And they are our pioneer.
Sorry, madam, excuse me. I'm being told that we need to slow down in speaking so that the translator picks.
Okay, so I think that's important for our guests to get. So let me slow down, that truly we have CBC, even though implemented in a staggered mode, where we are now at grade 7. It was not an overhaul implementation, but staggered. And that it is a success story because we have the first cohort in the junior secondary school. Thank you. Back to the presenter. Yeah, I truly enjoyed your paper because CBC is something that I'm truly very passionate about, because I know that is where the world is going. If we have to meet the SDG goals, then we cannot run away from CBC. However, I have got a few concerns. In your recommendations, it is clear that formative assessment is not a darling of the teachers and the students, the learners in Uganda. If that case study can be used to mirror the situation in the whole country. However, in your recommendations, I believe that there are certain gaps. If these teachers do not seem to favor formative assessment, why? In that line, then one of the most important recommendations in that study would be to retool the teachers, because these are teachers who have gone through the previous education system where we all were graded using marks as learners themselves. Then they go to the teacher training, it is the same thing. Then they're being told to hope from a marking key that grants scores to rubrics that should be able to speak to milestones. So I believe it would be enriching, because I know policies are made out of these studies, to think about the retooling of teachers, that they're given new tools in which to assess. The second one is a standardized assessment framework. I have, in one of my books, I've spoken to the CBC, the way it is implemented in Uganda, and those are one of the questions I was asking, whether there is a standardized assessment framework. That is very important, because it will then enhance some kind of teamwork amongst the teachers, How are you doing it? And, somehow, without having to take them into clusters to be trained. And another aspect that I truly believe that your study may be, if you haven't yet shared it with the ministry or the people who are in charge of that particular aspect of education within the ministry, is to interrogate the teacher-learner ratio. Formative assessment is examining the learners, assessing them as you teach, The feedback is instant, and it can be extremely hectic if they're large classes. So mine was just a bit of a contribution, a mind teaser for you to think about in your statement, in your recommendations. And then as far as the objectives are concerned, because it is a problem, and that's why I wanted us to get the slide on the topic, but that was not done, because then I would have interrogated this contribution, this intervention in maybe from another angle, is that, are we getting it? Yeah, the opening slide.
Kindly go to the first slide.
Yeah, the
one
first
that has
one.
the title.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so I just go to the objectives. I think it's taking a bit of, teachers, okay. Teachers and students' perception, where is it? It disappeared. All right. Okay, let me just then get the keyword there. You see, if you're looking at the perception, then there should be an intervening objective, whereby, you are looking for their suggestions, mitigating interventions that are coming from them, because you are looking at their perceptions. That's about their mindset. So for you to make it attractive to them, you should get to hear from them too. What do they think is the best way forward? Because in that way, then they're looking at many things: their competencies themselves, the available resources, and any other challenge that they may be facing. And thank you so much for your time, and that's a beautiful paper.
Thank you. As we wait for Jacqueline to get ready, we can give our presenter some 3 minutes to respond. Madam?
Thank you for the questions, and thank you for the questions and the appreciation of the work. The first question that I noted was about the favoring of summative over formative assessment, and it was, is it about the lack of information? That is basically what I heard. Based on the research that we did, the issue is that you find that there in some institutions or in some schools, they still have formative assessment at the end of the term. So the students tend to prepare more for those end of term exams because they go with reports. So they prepare more for those exams compared to these activities. Actually, they are called activities of integration. So they prepare more for the end of term exams than the activities of integration, and they tend to be too many. So they reach an extent of just going for those activities because they consider them to be, it has become, so like every week, every night or every week we have these activities, so let's just go and do them and get them done. Then much work for the teachers. The pupil-student ratio is still, a teacher-student ratio is still an issue. And then teachers' motivation. Yesterday I talked to one of the people work here in Kenya. They told me that the teachers are actually given money for activities, which is not the case in Uganda. So motivation of the teachers is an issue there. And then I was telling them that actually for us in Uganda, you find that most of the teachers that I at least know, they teach in more than one school. So you find that teacher will not give so much attention to the learners because they still have to meet the cost of living. So even if one is working in a public school or in a government school, they still have some other school where they're teaching, and for us it's a normal. And the other question was about the goal of assessment to the learners. Do they assess all the learners? Yes, they assess them in form of the activities of integration. But of course, like we know how formative assessment is, assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment as learning. So assessment as learning is a bit tricky simply because of the number of the learners. So all of them cannot be involved because of the time factor, because of the classes. And then I think I've talked about the status of assessment. Are there any other ways of assessment of the learners such that they can be able to achieve? I think like Madam has told me, definitely we need to establish those ways, but I believe that the ways are definitely there. There are ways of assessing those learners other than, like we said, it's assessment as learning. It is very possible, but like in some schools, there are schools that have 2 teachers in a class. So the learning is going on, but there are 2 teachers that are in charge of the class. So maybe it could be modified that way, because I believe for formative assessment it's possible to have more than 1 teacher in a class. Why not? But when you go to some of even the public schools, you'll find that the population is high, but the teachers are assigned, for example, for us we still call them subjects. The teachers assigned per subject, it's only 1 teacher in a class. And yet, those are some of the schools that have really a high population, especially in the urban areas, that is in Wakiso, and even then when it comes to the setting of the rural areas, the failure of the absenteeism is a major issue. So basically I think that is it, unless there is something that I've not been able to answer. Those are the questions that I had. Which approaches, I'm going to look into that, but like I said, having more than 1 teacher, I think would be a good idea. Pardon? Okay. Otherwise, thank you so much for appreciating the work. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Madam, for your presentation. Now, in the competency-based curriculum in Kenya, and by extension the competency-based assessment, there is a new element that has been brought forward, which is community service learning. And community service learning is gaining popularity in Kenya and across many countries where their curricula focuses on competency. To make us understand this better, I would invite our next presenter, Jacqueline. I may not introduce her because I would make a mistake. Jacqueline, kindly tell us about yourself and then go ahead with your presentation on CSL. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. You'd have just said I'm the owner of the house. But that's on a light touch. My name is Jacqueline Onyango. I'm presenting this paper on behalf of my colleagues, Dr. Kasisi and Rosalind Morema. But I am the Senior Deputy Director in charge of curriculum for basic education at this institute. Teacher by profession, having taught for several years in secondary school and in teacher training. So let's move on. We just want to share an experience that we have as Kenya. We are aware that we are moving on with the competency-based curriculum. We have our first students, the pioneer class, who are now in grade 7. And the milestones that we have taken is just what we want to share. But community service learning came to us and we picked it as an area that we wanted to use to mitigate the challenges that we found when we did our needs assessment that informed the curriculum reform. What we are showing is the Kenya Vision 2030. We inaugurated it in 2008 and we are seeking to become a middle-income industrial country by the year 2030. The pillars that we have are 3, and education falls under the social pillar, and therefore becomes the basis for which transformation can be gained to ensure that we are getting ourselves to where we want to be. Next slide, please. So when we did the needs assessment in 2016, we wanted to inform the process. Earlier on, there had been a task force in 2010 that gave out its report and indicated that there was a major need for a change, not for just a review, but a reform which was going to take over 60% of the change that we required. Now, the purpose of the needs assessment as KICD carried it out was to ensure that we can pick up what the needs of the country were so that we are able to speak to those as we come to engage in the curriculum change process. So in summary, what Kenyans did say is that they wanted an age-appropriate curriculum that would enable our children to be self-reliant, to have integrity, to be able to demonstrate patriotism, and all in all, ensure that there is a smooth transition from one level of education to the other. We, at that time, were running a curriculum that has 8 years of primary education, 4 years of secondary education, and 4 years of university education, but depending on which subjects or which course you are undertaking. There are some that are more than 4 years, and at tertiary level, which is not necessarily at university courses, we have others that are less than 4 years. So specifically, what are the things that we were looking out in terms of the general needs that the public told us they wanted to deal with? Don't worry that I am looking up, it's because my glasses cannot focus on the small print down here. So there was a need. Remember, we are talking about coexistence, we are talking about the patriotism. We had had our challenges. I'm sure we can reflect on the year 2007 into 2008 as we had some elections. It was a very challenging time for us, and that was a major setback with regards to our national cohesiveness and our national unity. We also have challenges, like all other countries have, of corruption and tribalism in different formats, and we were asking ourselves, how can we ensure that these are taught to our children and ourselves so that we can be able to change and follow the rules that are set for us. We are talking about a huge youth force that are educated, but not able to have gainful employment. Why? Because we are all waiting to be employed for the white-collar jobs, which now are not necessarily available. So the question was, how do we build the capacities of learners so that they are able to think of doing something with the education they have had other than waiting for employment, possibly in the public service. And then, of course, when we are looking at the development of learners, we wanted to ensure, or the request from our citizens was that we must ensure that we are teaching the learner holistically. Based on the different challenges we have had, the biggest gap in our training was actually a career path that children take. That even as we take them through learning, they find it difficult to choose careers. We are talking about behavior that is not commensurate with the norms that the country aspires for. But we are also talking about curricula that can cater for all learners. And that is why you look at physical development and we reflect immediately on the learners with special needs, so that we are not making a curriculum that is one size fits all, but a curriculum that would be able to speak to the different learners that we have to cater for. And of course, finally, while we really appreciate that exams are a necessity in an education system, that should not be the focus. That beyond the exams, I should be able to have come out with skills that enable me to do much more after the paper that I have got in terms of the education I have received. So what then did we do? We decided to structure our system based on what we believed would be the best progression of a child. And so we had 3 tiers for learning. The first being early years, then middle school education, and finally senior school. The early years comprises of the learners in pre-primary education from the ages of about 5 into grades 1, 2, and 3 that will take them to age about 7, 8, give and take. The middle school is again also for a cohort of 2 levels, where we have the upper primary, grade 4 to 6, and subsequently grade 7 to 9. A span of 9 to about 14, 15 years. And then the last stage is the senior secondary, where we have our learners between the ages of 15, 16, 17, and 19, give and take. The purpose for these tiers was so that we can tailor the curriculum to fit into what we believed would be the progressive learning path of a child going through these stages, and therefore give them an opportunity to progressively learn, gain the skills that they are supposed to gain until they get to the time when they are choosing their pathways, which is actually in senior school, where we provided for 3 pathways different from the situation now. To the right, you can see there seems to be another path that is being followed. Basically, this is the path for our learners with special needs. They are categorized differently. We are working within 4 categories of special needs learners. The learners with visual impairment, those with hearing impairment, with physical impairment, and those with mental challenges. For the first 3 categories that I have indicated, if the cases are not severe, we have adapted curricula for these learners. So basically, they will be following the path that I indicated first in the 3 tiers, with adaptation of their curriculum to enable them do it according to their the disability that they display. So for instance, if it is the visually impaired, then we don't expect that in the curriculum we say they should observe, because they are not having the ability to observe. So in that case, we are able to give them an alternative. But the pathway being shown is basically for the mentally challenged, who will not be able to do the regular curriculum and will not be able to do an adapted curriculum. So we have a special curriculum for them, Based on their severity, they go through different stages from that foundational to the vocational stage. Next slide, please. So these are the pathways just broken into the tracks so that our learners have a wider opportunity for choices as they go to senior school. But let us go to the community service learning and see what is it that we were looking at. Next slide, please. So we know that community service learning is actually an opportunity to offer learners to be able to practice what they learn in school. I'm not in school, but in the classroom from the content that has been presented to the teacher, and transfer that knowledge and the skills they have into performing certain tasks or being able to do certain things within their environment. It is clustered both within subjects that are being taught, but also it can be handled through the clubs. The components are varied and will include what we have indicated: entrepreneurship, citizenship, life skills, financial literacy, research, and communication. And what you see here is basically an opportunity for learners to integrate what they have learned by and large across all the subjects to be able to undertake certain tasks which do not require one skill or one competence for them to undertake. It requires an integration of competencies. Now, when we compare community service learning to community service, basically we are looking at community service as a requirement. In most cases, you'll find that it is a requirement that doesn't necessarily have any compensation, or it is part of a program. You'll find many of our universities and even schools where students will be required to take community service. And so we are just saying that for us, we are picking the component of the service, community service learning, and not the community service. So that while we are saying it is compulsory for all our children to undertake these activities, it is for the purposes of it being seen as an approach which we know is what community service learning really is. Next slide, please. So when we conceptualized community service learning, we took it in two forms. That we looked at it as an approach, but again in our innovation we decided to handle it as a subject. Looking at the issues that had been raised in the needs assessment, and therefore wanting to ensure, because the big gap was the knowledge the students had as they complete school, but inability to demonstrate that which they know. So it is easy for a child to be able to write the exam of what they have been asked to do, but if you ask them to sew a button onto a cloth, it becomes a challenge for them. And so we looked at it, and given the circumstances we have, and this is where you look at alignment of curriculum and the needs of the society, which is actually the purpose that curriculum serves. So for the lower levels, we used it as an approach, and this is what we are doing now in terms of implementation from pre-primary 1 up to the grade 7 that we have undertaken. We ensure that the activities the learners are going through reflect the kind of circumstances they have at home. So for instance, if we were learning about cleanliness, then it becomes very easy for our children to participate in cleaning activities at home and ensure the environment is clean, or even within the school environment. And a lot of emphasis at the lower levels is laid on support of those learners in terms of helping them to know how things are done right. But as we move to grade 7, which is our middle school, the second tier of middle school, we are having learners who are within the ages of 13, 14, a lot more vibrant, a lot more inquisitive, and learners who have a lot more energy. And so they can be able to undertake certain activities. So while we are still using it as an approach, we are now giving them a little more extra tasks where we are laying emphasis on their participating in collaborative activities that they can do as individuals, as groups, as classes. So that again, they think of what they want to do and they can be able to do the same to mitigate the challenges that we may find in society. Now, as we get to grade 10, this is where our innovation is picked. We have actually made community service learning a standalone subject, and we have developed curricula for the same, and that is what our learners are going to go through. So that as they go through that level, the expectation is that a student will be able to pick an area, be guided on the modalities of how that project is going to be done, and at the end of the day, be able to carry out a project that seeks a solution to a challenge that they find within their environment. And we believe that by doing that, then the students already get used to the environment that they are in so that they are able to take initiative and be able to also participate in what is happening around them, and they don't have to wait for instructions to be given to them. That is really building the competences that they require. At teacher education, depending on the course that is being undertaken, we have upgraded our teacher education curricula to all be diploma courses. Before, we have had a certificate for the early childhood and the primary education, but the diploma was for the secondary teacher education. Now, all of them have been upgraded to diploma courses. So because the early childhood and the primary diploma in teacher education the teacher is expected to undertake all the subjects, we are ensuring we emphasize the approach model so that they are able to prepare the learners and the activities the learners need to undertake. But at the same time, we expect that this student teacher will also be able to go through activities or projects that they can do for CSL so that it is not just for the child they are going to teach when they graduate, but also for themselves because it still builds their capacities in different forms. At the Diploma for Secondary Teacher Education, we have provided it as a standing course, expecting that these students will be able to go through the same, but at the same time also learn how to prepare community service learning activities for the subjects that they have selected. At diploma level, for secondary, the students are allowed to select 2 subjects that they are going to teach so that they are not doing all the subjects together. Next slide, please. So by and large, the essence of our community service learning in the form that we have designed it is so that we build the 21st century learner. But I want to say that when we did the pilot for the community service learning, which is not what we have discussed here, we did not do it with the pioneer students of the CBC, for the simple reason that we have not reached the secondary level. So what did we do? The pilot that we undertook was done in secondary schools that are undertaking the curriculum we are phasing out, with a tryout to see how the uptake of these children would be. And that is what informed our decision that we are going to actually have community service learning at the senior school as a standalone subject. If I reflect on the previous system which I went through, in Form 5 and 6 we had a paper that was called general paper. So regardless of whether you did sciences or the arts, all of us ended up doing the general paper. You would want to say that this would be similar because at the senior secondary, they select the subjects which they take for different pathways. They don't have to do all the subjects. And from there then, if each one of them has that component of community service, it enables them to continue to appreciate what the environment is like and what the expectations are. The pictures we are showing are just an indication. Like I said, the students who we did, the schools in which we did the pilot were the schools that are undertaking the curriculum we are phasing out. And because of the SDGs and a lot of ESD activities, we see the students pick up so many of these activities already. And so these are students in the coast. They are replanting the mangrove, which has been depleted quite a bit. And so looking at this from our point of view, it's not just that this was something to serve the competency-based curriculum cohort. These are the issues we are dealing with when we look at the challenges that education is trying to mitigate. And so that pilot actually indicated to us that it doesn't matter which cohort, whether it is for the new curriculum or the one that we are phasing out, the competences required by learners are all the same, and we must be able to build those capacities. This is another group of children, may not be very visible, but basically they are rearing chicken. In my home village, chicken is a delicacy. And so if you don't have chicken in your house or in your home, then that is a problem. You must have a chicken running around. And if they're able to do this in school, then there is every probability that they can do it at home, which then removes our fear of this that we call poverty. We conveniently, as African countries, like to say we are poor. But when you're asked, what exactly are you poor about, sometimes we are not able to undertake. With this kind of activities, then children can begin to be part of the solution, even in their own homes, where they are able to do activities and be able to probably support the family, sell those eggs or chicken and buy the pencil that they require so that they do not have to be very dependent and it becomes part of their DNA as they are growing up. These are vegetables being planted in bottles. The bottles that you have next to you, I'm sure as we finish taking our water, we leave them there because we have no use for them. But somebody would have very good use of them and be able to do the same. These are things you can even hang on the walls around the house. And you're planting your vegetables in them and being able to sustain. So ladies and gentlemen, this was an experience sharing and confidence that really the decisions we make to be able to mitigate the challenges we have in our countries are workable and they can be successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for your presentation. Could we give a better clap? Maybe our sugar level has gone down now that it's approaching lunchtime. But that notwithstanding, we need to give Jacqueline some feedback. Just 2 or 3, then we break for lunch. I will start from my far right, and then there is a gentleman here, then the lady. Could you pass the microphone?
Thank you. I think my voice is loud enough.
Okay. Please remember to speak slowly so that